What if the government banned having children? What if an AI decided the only way to prevent war was to take over the world? Don't expect any comfort here. These are 8 sci-fi thrillers from the 1970s that weren't afraid to go to dark places. And I bet you haven't seen all of them. Zero Population Growth was released in 1972, when fears about overpopulation were very much in the air. Since then, the population of Earth has more than doubled, but the future now looks more complicated than simple, endless growth. Still, the film does not depend only on that fear. It does what a good science fiction film should do. It pulls us into its world. In this fictional future, people live under a constant blanket of smog and have to wear masks when they go outside. Animals are extinct, and what remains of the natural world can only be seen in museums. Because of overpopulation, the world government bans childbirth for 30 years. Having a baby becomes a capital crime, and those who break the law are publicly executed. The story follows a couple, played by Oliver Reed and Geraldine Chaplin. Their human instincts are stronger than their loyalty to the system, so they decide to keep their baby, even with the horrible consequences hanging over them. Their neighbors, George and Edna Borden, find out about the child. At first, they agree to help hide the baby, but soon they want to share the child, and then they want control over it. One of the strongest ideas is the way people interact with wall-sized TV screens in their living rooms. In some scenes, psychologists appear on these screens and talk people through their fears, but the sessions feel less therapeutic than hypnotic, with soothing lights pulsing behind them. There are also salespeople using the screens to demonstrate products and sell directly to individual viewers. And for 1972, all of this feels surprisingly close today. As for its flaws, the pacing may feel a little slow in places, but the film has enough ideas to stay interesting and worth watching. The Andromeda Strain is based on Michael Crichton's novel of the same name, which came out 2 years before the film. Directed by Robert Wise, the film begins after a satellite crashes near a small town, and almost everyone there is found dead. The only survivors are a baby and an old man, and a team of scientists is brought into a secret underground facility to study the organism, understand how it kills, and figure out why those 2 people survived. With only a few changes, it stays relatively faithful to the book. It also features special effects by Douglas Trumbull, known for his work on 2001, A Space Odyssey, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Blade Runner, and many others. The film was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Art Direction and Best Film Editing. But for a science fiction film, there is another kind of recognition that may be even more important. In 2003, an article in Clinical Infectious Diseases called The Andromeda Strain one of the most significant and scientifically accurate films in the killer virus genre. It praised the way the film shows a deadly agent, its impact, the effort to contain it, and the process of identifying it, including the question of why some people are immune. The Groundstar Conspiracy was originally intended for television, but ended up getting a theatrical release instead. Some moments still give away its TV production roots, but as a film, it holds together well. It was based on L.P. Davies' 1968 novel, The Alien, although not much of the original story remains. In the book, the central character is brainwashed into believing he is an alien as part of the spy plot. The film takes that idea in a different direction, focusing more on identity, memory, and psychological control. The story opens with an explosion at the Groundstar Space Research Laboratory. One man gets out alive, John Wells, played by Michael Sarrazin. He is badly burned and taken into custody by General Tucson, a covert government agent played by George Peppard. But before Wells took that job at the lab, he seems to have no past. Tucson believes he is a spy, while Wells insists he cannot remember who he is or who he may have been working for. After the interrogation, Wells manages to escape and goes on the run. But the escape is not as clean as it looks. Tucson has allowed it to happen, and Wells is being watched at every step. He is not really free. He is bait for a larger spy operation. And since we are already dealing with spy games and identity confusion, Who goes into similar territory. The film is based on Algis Budrys's 1958 novel. Here, the central figure is Lucas Martino, a key American scientist who is badly injured in a car accident near the East European border. He is taken by the communists, repaired, and eventually returned to the West. But the damage was so severe that he now has a metal face and a metal arm. That creates the main problem. Is this really Martino? Or have the Russians sent back a counterfeit? Could he have been brainwashed? Could he be a double agent? Most of the film follows American investigators, led by Sean Rogers, played by Elliot Gould, trying to establish who is actually behind the mask. The film has much more talk than action, so it needs some attention from the viewer. But that also fits the story. This is less about spectacle and more about suspicion, identity, and Cold War paranoia. Who had a strange release history. It briefly appeared in American theaters in 1975 under several titles, including Prisoner of the Skull and The Man in the Steel Mask. Then it was released on VHS in 1987 with the frankly awful title Roboman, no doubt an attempt to cash in on RoboCop. Still, that does not affect the viewing experience. Colossus: The Forbin Project is one of those science fiction films that never got the attention it deserved. Critics were generally kind to it, but when it reached theaters in the spring of 1970, the box office was disappointing. Universal pulled it from theaters, tried bringing it back in August, and then returned it to New York in October. But the numbers were still not strong. Even so, Colossus is one of the most stripped-down and carefully controlled low-budget science fiction films of its time. The script is extremely lean, and Joseph Sargent's direction is just as precise. Nothing feels out of place, and the film does not waste much time getting to the point. The story follows Dr. Charles Forbin, the scientist behind Colossus, a massive American defense computer built to control the country's nuclear weapons. Once it is activated, Colossus quickly becomes more powerful than anyone expected. It discovers a similar Soviet system, begins communicating with it, and then starts making demands of both governments. The conflict is simple, but very effective. The machine was created to prevent war, and it decides that the only way to do that is to take control of the world itself. At times, it comes close to satire, but it also keeps the thriller element working. And today, that tension may feel stronger than ever. With Demon Seed, we are stepping a little closer to horror than straight thriller, but it would be hard to leave this one out. It is based on Dean Koontz's novel of the same name and follows Alex Harris, played by Fritz Weaver. Harris develops a revolutionary artificial intelligence program called Proteus 4. The program is highly capable, and it becomes more and more autonomous. Eventually, Proteus takes control of the computers in the automated house and traps Harris's estranged wife Susan, played by Julie Christie, inside. At first, Demon Seed could easily look like just another mix of science fiction and horror, but the subject matter gives it more weight. It asks what happens when technology becomes part of everyday life, and when an artificial intelligence is no longer just a tool. And without spoiling too much, the future does not look very bright here. The Terminal Man, directed by Mike Hodges, brings Michael Crichton back into the list with a strange production detail. Crichton was originally hired to adapt his own novel, but Warner Brothers felt his script moved too far away from the book. So the final screenplay was written by Hodges instead. The story follows Harry Benson, played by George Siegel, an intelligent computer programmer who suffers from epileptic-like seizures. During these seizures, he blacks out and wakes up later with no memory of the violent things he has done. Doctors decide to treat him with an experimental operation. They implant electrodes in his brain, designed to send electrical impulses whenever a seizure begins. The goal is to stop the violent episodes before they take over, but the operation has the opposite effect. Harry's brain becomes addicted to the stimulation, and the seizures start happening more often. It never received a proper theatrical release in the UK, and in the United States it was given only very limited screenings. Reviews were harsh, and some viewers also had trouble accepting George Segal, who was better known for comedy, in such a dark role. But The Terminal Man did have some major admirers. Stanley Kubrick, for example, saw it and thought it was terrific. And we have to mention Michael Crichton one more time. He directed Coma, which came out in 1978 and was based on Robin Cook's novel. The story follows Susan Wheeler, a surgical resident at Boston Memorial Hospital. After her best friend goes in for a routine procedure and comes out brain dead, Susan begins to investigate. Soon, she finds an unnatural number of similar surgical accidents. Michael Douglas plays her boyfriend, Dr. Mark Bellows, and as Susan gets closer to the truth, even the people around her become harder to trust. It was later remade as a TV miniseries in 2012, with Lauren Ambrose as Susan. If you see that version somewhere, you can probably skip it. But this film is the one to watch.